meeting is a public meeting and we are being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. So the first item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Okay, apologies for absence.
So we received apologies and absence from Councillor Potter and Councillor Hartley. I believe Councillor Riley is away.
Thank you. Item 3, the next meeting, page 5.
Ask a question first. Would it be appropriate to have minutes silence for Councillor Schwartz?
Can I take matters arising? No? Okay. Chairman's announcements, obviously, we've declared the second policy on Councillor Nigel Shaw, appropriate goal in silence. Just do that, please. Thank you very much. Councillor Broadland, to agenda item 5, and obviously we've got declarations of interest. Do you have any declarations of interest?
On this occasion.
Thank you.
I'll try later on.
Item 6. Thank you. Move on to agenda item 7, page 15. Okay. We've got Mr. Mike. We'll go on first.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just start off and Superintendent Chris Barnard, who's our district commander. He's been first now for which is good. Chris is a very proactive community police officer and has worked well with the council in terms of developing strategies and just making sure that the crowd is safe. This is part of Chris and the police's engagement plan. So I had the use of across the slides, which Chris will talk through. Really, the aim of today is to get the chance to just see where we are in terms of the crime message manager in Broadland, but then a chance to ask any questions, etc. And discussion. That's okay, Chairman. Is there a clicky do for?
There's my keyboard next to you. If you just hit the arrows on it, you should move it across it.
Okay. I'll hand over to Chris.
Great, thank you. I should be able to cope with the technology between the two of us. Yeah, sorry, apologies. How's that? Yeah, thank you. Is that any better?
That's a little nearer. Keep putting forward.
Yeah, that's okay. Great, sorry for that. Failed on the technology already, so we'll try and improve. So thank you for the introduction and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I won't make many unfortunately, but I hope that you may well have had the opportunity to meet with the local inspectors so we can share the to the west of the district or around to the east. If if you haven't, would like to put that line, so we can always provide the contact details for you. So I'm here this morning to talk you through the district perspective in terms of crime. I also wanted to give you a bit of a flavour in terms of the types of calls that we're getting and how we respond to those. Very short piece on child exploitation, child crime exploitation specifically, and a little bit around some of the plans we've got around engagement with our communities as well. So not too many slides, I promise you. There may be the opportunity for a question at the end as well. So I start off with crime, which again is a table on the screen there for those that can see it. I will talk you through the headlines there. So I start off by saying that Broadland, by any measure, is a safe district, and it also sits within a safe county as well. In Norfolk, we're very fortunate for that to be the case. That doesn't mean it's complacent at all, I promise you that. So the table you've got up there shows some changes in terms of the year-on-year from April to April. What we have had in comparisons with 2021 are a little bit irrelevant because of the effect of COVID-19. So clearly, a lot of negative effect for our communities, but in terms of crime, actually quite positive in terms of a significant downturn, which you would have expected. The more relevant comparison, I suppose, is between 1920 and then 21-22. And in terms of acquisitive crime, we can see that actually that's a downward trend. So we've gone from 114 down to 82 in total across those crime types there. However, I just want to put that in some form of context. So at the same time, we've seen acquisitive crime or the traditional types of crime going down. We are spending more of our time now recording and investigating offences that relate to violence, other core offences and sexual offences, and a large proportion of those particular offences relate to domestic instances and what we term offences that are behind closed doors, that you might not see on the street, but they are there, they are being reported. The fact that they're being reported in greater numbers we see as being a good thing. That's something we proactively look to achieve. But with that, obviously, comes an increasing demand in terms of investigating and attempting to get those positive outcomes. Also, we're having to evolve and change. The crime is changing, the profile of crime is changing. So I'm sure most will probably be aware of or being affected in some way, perhaps by either cybercrime or fraud. These are complex. There are challenges in terms of investigating these crimes. Certainly with fraud, we see that this will operate across international borders. There are some challenges there. I'm not saying it's perfect, but we are doing a lot of work both nationally, locally across the county and abroad as well, in terms of focusing on those fraud offences. We'll just move on to the next slide from that. So you've got some information there around our calls for service. I just wanted to point out that in relation to those that are crime-related calls, so we included those that relate to violence, suspicious circumstances, and crime other, as we call it. It's not the exact science in terms of the categories, but they would account for around 22% of our calls. 12% of our time spent with or the calls is spent on road-related instances, and then 1 in 5 relates to domestic instances or concern for safety. Now, a large proportion of those concerns for safety will relate to missing people and people that are experiencing mental health crisis. We would obviously prefer to prevent that and to enable people not to need to reach the point of mental health crisis. That's certainly something that we're not going to fix on our own, on the police, and that's why a lot of time and effort goes into both counselling to inform the early help hub, working alongside our operation partnership team and the police to try and nip issues in the bud and try to divert people to other options that are available within the county, within the district, hopefully to prevent the need for police to get involved in that point of crisis. Police are not the best people to deal with the mental health crisis. I think it's fair to say we recognise that. So where we can prevent, we absolutely do try to do that. in terms of response, move on, sorry. In terms of sorry, it's on the same slide there. So in terms of responding to instances, now what we aim to do is for our emergency calls, our treble 9 calls, we aim to get to these instances within 15 minutes within our urban areas and 20 minutes within our rural areas. And as you can see, we're in the higher 80% there. Our target is 90%. So we're close but not quite there. That means we're not complacent. We do regularly problem solve that in terms of what can we do to get there quicker. Last year we started using the telephone because we opened in effect the telephone response base. So in order to service the telephone Drayton Council area, we've actually got local cops being based there and spending more of their time to be able to react to. You can probably see on that there where one of our hotspots is in that kind of the Greater Norwich area to include the suburbs. We're a little sad in terms of the fact that we will lose our Spraston police station. That's because of the tradition that it holds. It's been there for many, many years. Most people will be aware of the fact that there is a Spraston police station. But however, there's a flip side to that. We get to operate from a brand new police station, a purposely built police station, which isn't too far down the road as well. And actually, the communities and the district has changed around us. So actually now being close to the NDR, to the A47, Broadland has got to be the best place to be situated in order to be able to respond better as well. So we look forward to that move, which we hope will be happening not too distant future in October. We also hope to work towards a co-location, perhaps in the Horizon building. Again, not too distant future. So that problem solving, that link between the police and the health hub will just be assisted even better. So we're already co-located here. We'll be bringing a wider team together so that we can work even closer together, which I think will be really positive. I'll just move on. So I just wanted to include a slide here on child criminal exploitation. And that's just to introduce it really as a bit of an emerging issue for the same emerging. It's been an issue now for at least a year, if not probably getting on for 2. And something that we are continuing to make efforts to both prevent and possibly deal with. I'm talking here about youth violence, and that will be linked to the phenomenon of what is known as county lines. So that'll be where we have those drug lines running from some of our biggest cities in the country out to reach tentacles reaching into places like Norwich and some of our smaller cities and towns. Unfortunately, it comes with people taking advantage of primarily juveniles, vulnerable people, people that are getting tied up in this, people that are building up things like drug debts, and then either being caused violence themselves or being forced into a position where in effect they form part of the gang. Clearly, a lot of risk attached to that, a lot of vulnerability. A lot of the criminality we see within central Norwich, but what we are seeing is that is spreading out. And I'm not saying there's a violence issue within Broadland. What I'm saying is that at least 8, in fact, as we currently speak, 8 of those high or medium risk cases involve children that live on Broadland. So there is a link there. There is a need to look absolutely at safeguarding those individuals. And there's a map on the screen, as you can see there. There's a number of instances that are highlighted. That they're the instances that occurred in the last 6 months that we see as being associated with county lines and effective youth violence. The one of particular note, which occurred in Mark Cross, was the sad horrible murder of Joe Dixon, 18-year-old male. Now he had links to Broadland, he had lived on Broadland. And as I say, it happened back in February, and that really was something that never been seen within the area. It hasn't been seen before, so that's a worry for us. We don't want this issue to grow, which is why we've got dedicated teams that are looking after this. We've got links in with all partner agencies to make sure that we can get not just tackling the crime that comes with this, to tackle the safeguarding issues and try and prevent people from making a decision. So just moving on, I always try to cover a broad number of issues within the short amount of time I've got. I do want to try and cover our efforts around engagement with the public. So again, I mentioned some of the negative impact of clearly what came with the pandemic and the associated lockdowns. One of the small positives that we got from that was that our use of technology increased overnight because it had to, was the bottom line. So the use of MS Teams, the ability to be able to interact with our communities and key members online was sped up, and we weren't doing too much of that before that time, if I'm being completely honest. We never see that as being an entire fix. Clearly there are still sections of our community that will choose to not want to do business online. So the next stage for us is making sure we have a hybrid approach to that. So you'll hopefully be involved in some of our local priority settings. We hope to reach a position whereby actually we can choose, you can do it from your front room online, or you can attend a meeting, speak to an officer in person. So we're looking to move to that. We're also looking to move towards using online surveys for those that choose to want to do that. That's all in a bit more of an effort to rely on the opinions of people essentially. So instead of what can be a relatively small number set in a community centre somewhere, looking to make the most of a broad sort of reach, if you like, across the with use of the internet, so that everyone can have their say. We started using an initiative called Park Walk Talk early part of last year. We found that's been reasonably successful. So it's a very simple initiative. It's pretty much what it says on the tin. So we're looking at officers now, not just going from job to job to job, but when we have got some time to park up, to get out of the car, to walk around, to have meaningful conversations with their communities. So we can target this at crime hotspots, at ASB hotspots, and we regularly do. But equally, we could also consider where we haven't had need to spend our time. It may well be there hasn't been crime reported, we haven't investigated crime. However, what we have found, undeniably, is that people still want to see cops on the streets. So in that village setting, unfortunately, we can't have a bobby on the beat for every village, of course we can't. What we can do is make sure we're spending time at being seen where we can to offer the opportunity for people to come up and just have a bit of a chat, because we get benefit from that. We get huge amounts of intelligence potentially coming from the community, which is absolutely fantastic. And hopefully people will feel benefit in terms of the fact that there's a chance to talk and be listened to. And that just gives you a bit of a flavour there in terms of the spread of what Park Walk Talk has given us in terms of engagement. So it's not just that formal meeting setting. These are the engagements that have happened out there in the community, with cops being supported and being pushed out of the stations, if you have a nice possible sense of being pushed out of stations, actually spending time in cafes. There's nothing wrong with cops sitting down and having coffee whilst they're doing the work, probably on a laptop, probably on a mobile in front of them, like we all are now. So we are slowly catching up with with all the technology that allows us to get out of bed and get out of the stations. So I've talked more than enough, so apologies for taking up probably a little bit more time than I should have done. Try to do it in that with slides, but I'm going to get the time out of questions.
Chairman, if I may, just to finish off 4 questions. So in terms of relations to the council, there's 2 key elements which affect us. One is regulatory services, in terms of what Chris is talking about. Tension in and around the home is an issue. We're seeing an increase in just antisocial behaviour and just tension, neighbours falling out, and they require a response from us to do that. And ultimately, in terms of housing, so people wanting to either move, we're seeing a huge increase in the number of domestic abuse cases, which also require a lot of our services. So as Chris said, it's the police are great at getting out there and deal with the issue of ultimate prevention, which is where we use it, and we can speak more about that. So the pathways into prevention. One of the issues that I've raised as a topic potentially is a lot of the stuff that Chris and I deal with and Nick is the underlying causes around mental health and mental well-being. I think that's an issue that we do need to address. I think it's something perhaps if I can suggest that we champion in terms of what more can we do this year, but if I can end the there, Chairman.
Thank you, Larry. I sort of think it's on the start. Caroline, Ken, Roland, Sue.
Hi. Firstly, I want to say I'm very grateful to the police who attend my council surgery every month. Sergeant Morrison has been very supportive. Secondly, I was going to say it's very good for the public to come along and just sit in the library in a relaxed atmosphere and talk to the police. I'm very grateful for that. Violence against the person, does that include people in care homes?
Yeah, yes, it will.
It does, yeah, because it's quite high figures, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just wondered. You don't separate that yet?
No, we can break figures down. I was trying to do a bit of an overview, I suppose.
Yeah.
Really, we do have a significant number of care homes that really include
Yeah, it's
some of
taken
our,
me a while.
and our hospital settings as well, we include that. And that does probably quite a significant number within.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Chris. Nice to see you. I'm just wondering, we've got major housing developments coming up at Rackheath and specifically Caverham, where I'm a councillor. Probably talking about 10,000 extra people in there and probably throughout the country. My problem is, you probably can't resolve it, but I'm looking for a perspective of how you're going to manage the manpower for that. And I know the Chief Constable needs to be involved with it, because we need to know how you're going to be able to manage extra probably 20,000 people in the next few years. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a very significant issue for us because we can't have a look towards the horizon the next 10, 15 years and see that projection of growth there is significant, particularly Rackheath as well. We see that becoming probably quite a significant town-sized development, don't we? We are involved in that planning phase. Part of that will be that developers will be supporting all of the local partner agencies to grow as well. I mentioned domestic incidences. This stands to reason. The more households you have, the more that will grow. It's already a significant proportion of our demand, as it currently is. So it stands to reason we are going to get significantly busier. We will have to service more. So we are involved in those planning meetings. We certainly do have projections within the county. Broadland is no exception. What I can say is that certainly Broadland and South London, for that matter, actually are well up there in terms of the expected levels of development.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Chris. Listen to Councillor Creamy saying wonderful things about the police engagement in Taberham. And at a parish council meeting that I attended in the Marshes Ward last night, I mentioned that there is the local community police meeting via Teams tomorrow evening. And the comeback was I'm a little concerned about it, in that there was one response that the person said they don't like Teams meetings, they want face-to-face. The one person was saying that they had several instances of burglary, but no real interaction with the police after that. And I encouraged that person to attend the Teams meeting to raise those concerns. Then I had another incident from one of the persons present who had spent 2 hours reporting 3 incidents that they had CCTV evidence, which was reported, and they also had no feedback after spending 2 hours on the phone giving the information. And then lastly, so I encouraged that person also to attend the Teams meeting, although I don't know whether they would have received the invitation to the Teams meeting. As far as I know, it goes to the clerk who then distributed to members, but not members of the public. So what happens in Taperum is something that I would love to see happen in the Ankle division possibly. And then lastly, I was told that the teams meetings that are attended for the Ankle division tend to be one or two of the local parish clerks. So I don't know whether the parish clerks get the message and don't distribute it, or whether there is that issue with lack of interest. But I do recall a while ago that I think it was the PCC going around and having conversations with people. That's the sort of interaction that people would like to see in the area. So those are just some of the comments that I heard last night, which I was a little bit troubled by, and encouraging people to attend these meetings.
Thank you for the feedback. So I'll make a few notes there and I'll go back, and it seems like what I need to do is get Sergeant Harrison to have a conversation with Sergeant Ketteridge, who's covering the Marshes area amongst others at the moment as well, to maybe provide for that.
Can I just say, Vicky Bailey advertises on our social media pages. It's all over social media when the meetings are. It's in the newsletters. Maybe you need to get your clerks to put it in the social media pages so that more residents can see.
Thank you. Well, so I will take some responsibility for that, and hopefully I'll give you some reassurance that we've just recently employed a digital engagement officer, because we see that being so important in terms of the reach. So Vicky looks after our physical engagement meetings and opportunities, if you like. We've got someone to look after the social media side of things to create a little bit more of this time to focus on that. I absolutely agree that we realise there is a proportion of the community that won't want to do online, and actually don't want to force people to do something they don't want to do, or indeed completely pull the rug from them being able to be involved in those meetings. That it really is the local inspectors that need to be approached if people have got an issue in terms of specific crimes and our responses to those, because they will get answers for you. I think it's probably best if I provide contact details via mine for all of you to take back, and if you do have any residents come to you with issues, then please do feel free to contact the inspectors. Those conversations that you mentioned with the library, there is a concerted effort to not just have the structured meetings, which we have to have and actually see some benefit from, but also it's those we do street surgeries, we go to the supermarkets, we'll take a tablet along to people who complete the surveys there. That's where we see proper true engagement, if you like. That's where we see concerns being raised. We get a chance to actually sort of either inform if it's a case of people aren't completely aware as to why we've done something, or if we haven't done something quite right, we get a chance to actually learn that and fix it, put it right. So I'm not saying it's perfect, I'm saying it's probably out of the pandemic now, and there's been a bit of a time, but it's something that we are looking to sort of realise we need to change what we're doing, grow what we're doing. That includes the increase in staff that are specifically targeted at this, but also looking to make wider the choice of options in terms of how we engage. But thank you for your feedback.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Chair. I recently heard a statistic that mental health issues that are arising in 1 in 6 children of school age, going up from pre-pandemic from 1 in 9. And I'm wondering whether this is showing itself in crime statistics by young people. Avoiding crimes, and is that both boys and girls, if that is the case? Another thing that concerns me is local intelligence, and whether there's a difference between the perception that the police have of what's happening and what is actually happening in reality, and that's come to me through being involved in activities with young people. So recently we did a survey of young people to do with provision of resources for activities in our local area in Action. And it was organised by the young people on the school council at Action High School, but was pushed out to other schools that are schools in their new schools. And it was undertaken on a Google form. So they had a little video clip giving an explanation of what the survey was about, from it, and then the Google form out, and that was distributed to all the schools and school-aged children. And I'm wondering whether it's something that, if something like that was organised for young people, and it was obviously an anonymous return, whether you would get some more intelligence from school-aged children of what is actually happening and how often they are encountering drugs in particular, but any other forms of abuse or that was just a thought, because it has worked for this one kind of need for information. I'm wondering whether it would work for this.
Thank you for that. I absolutely do not claim to be an expert in mental health. I don't. I saw some headlines in terms of the effects of the pandemic. We keep coming back to that, don't we? But the effect of school children who were not able to go to school. So it seems to make sense to me anecdotally that may well have had a negative effect. It's really difficult to prove the effect in terms of crime. What I would start by saying is that a very much a large proportion of our school children across the district do not get involved in crime. They absolutely do not. It's small pockets. We as an organisation do our absolute level best to try not to criminalise children, because we've seen the negative effects that that can bring. That it tends to be the start of a pathway that we want to go on to. We see locally the benefits of both support and diversion. So what I mean by that is that where we are seeing mental health issues, and they it's difficult, isn't it? Because it's becoming more prevalent, because people are being diagnosed more now, more willing to come forward, or is it that mental health is increasing? I just don't know, I can't answer that. But where we do see it present itself, where we do see that early support, and we've mentioned this a couple of times now, where we've got support mechanisms in place, we refer to our agencies who are able to help. We have seen positive review stories. Equally, for those where it might not be mental health as an issue, it may well be that it's boredom, then we do see diversion happening. So, we do get space on the odd occasion of antisocial behaviour in parks and things like that. You can't help but sometimes you think that kids will be kids, and perhaps if they had something else to do, they would be involved in that. So we absolutely would be advocates, and we would support those, anything that really could grab people's grab children's imaginations, to allow them to want to do something more productive than perhaps not something to do, and start doing things that they would do out of boredom. So some of the issues that you mentioned, some of those sort of diversions that you've mentioned there, I would absolutely support. And yeah, it's difficult. I can't really answer the question in terms of whether we're seeing that in well, I can answer the question. I can't prove it from the data in terms of crime. It's not something we've seen that's overtly in your face in terms of the fact that this relates to an increase in mental health in children. We're now spending more of our time dealing with mental health per se, in children and in adults as well.
Thank you.
Sorry, yes. Thank you very much, Chris. I'd just like to say thanks also for the hard work and talk. Just to say thanks for the work you've done in our local parish. We've had incidents of antisocial behaviour, and that was taken on board by the local team. and we have had the big manager, so thanks to Mr. Godden, for coming around. And it's just been occasional, but people have actually remarked on the fact that they've seen a police officer walking around the village. And I think that just provides that confidence and reassurance. So thanks for that. And then in relation to local policing teams meeting as well, that Councillor Durden mentioned, when I have attended those meetings, and it is unfortunate that we don't have more people attending from our local area, but it is advertised on social media. I think it's perhaps about encouraging people on the ground, and ourselves included, to be able to attend those meetings. There is one tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. Clashes with other meetings, of course, as well, so you can't always attend, but you know, they are there. So again, thanks for that. But then my concern is resources, basically. So I think it was in 2015, you had about 1,500 officers available across the county. It's gone up to 1,800 officers, so that's good. And about 200 on duty at any one time, apparently. Although, you know, within our local area, there may only be 3 officers available to respond, as I understand it. So that's where we're at the moment. But you've got an increase in 999 calls, huge increase, it seems. And I suspect that's partly because when you try 101, you can't get through. And I've been in that situation. And so then after an hour, you have to revert to 999 because it can't wait. So I suggest that that's one area that he's looking at in terms of 101 calls and being able to respond to those. So then that takes the pressure in terms of off 999 calls. Because that demand is great and violence is increasing. And that's what people are concerned about. And it's through local domestic violence, antisocial behaviour, and that's of course for concern. I note, in terms of council tax increases for the police and crime commissioner, that has been way above, what local council tax from the councils. But it can't continue. So it was last year, for this year, 3.6%. 2021, 3.9%. And that cannot be sustained. And we're getting into a situation where we've got a huge cost of living crisis, we've got increase, as we've said, in year 999 calls, increase in violence, antisocial behaviour. Don't want to paint too bad a picture, but my question is, how are you going to be able to resource that going forward? Because that must be a concern.
Thank you. There's a few points there. I'll start off with thanks for recognition for BC Club. I will take that back and I'll thank you personally. It's music to my ears to hear that both you've had that contact with your local league manager and he's getting out there being seen, because that's exactly what we want. People like speaking to people at local face and Norfolk and Stanbury. So we'll take that back. Thank you. You're right. We have had an increase in officer numbers. I had alluded earlier to some of the challenges in terms of that changing crime profile. So when we look at cybercrime, fraud, youth on youth violence, it's been necessary to set up specific dedicated units to tackle these issues. We have got a finite number of cops. What that means is that we haven't got the officers for response policing that we might otherwise have had. If we had that increase in numbers and not seen that significant change in crime profile, we'd obviously have more bodies on the beat. So there's always a balancing act. We do want to put bodies on the beat, and it's initiatives like more talk that aim us to probably make the most of what we got. But it's a finite resource. There's an absolute need for detectives at the moment. We're seeing a national shortage, and an overseeing shortage of good experienced and skilled workforce in other sectors as well. But policing is no different. There are challenges in terms of we have seen an exponential rise in the reporting. I say that's not a negative thing. That can be, I hope that we see a positive thing in terms of reporting of serious sexual offences. But these are massively complex and cases that take significant amounts of time to get to court. So there's been an exponential rise in workload, perhaps away from frontline response policing,
that has necessitated the need to put more posts, if you like, to this specialist work. In terms of the response to the denied calls, they have increased, but I would argue, and it's always difficult to prove what you've prevented, but I know there's a lot of good work between both the early help and the police in terms of problem solving and nipping issues in the bud. So those, what we do is we regularly, routinely, on a monthly basis, we will capture those households, those individuals that are recording, significant pockets, if you like, of lives calls, emergency calls for help. We are finding that a substantial number of those are related to mental health. So we are doing our level best to try and problem solve those issues and prevent. It's not about driving down demand, it's about making sure we're able to then really target on where the real threat and risk is. So that I would argue that probably would have been more of a significant increase as to what it has been if we hadn't put those problem solving measures in place. You're right, where we have seen the increases in the non-emergency calls, and you're right, there's all the bleeding process in there. If we're not able to answer those in time, then potentially people may then choose to want to then use the emergency systems as well. So in light of, we mentioned the significant development across Broadland. I think what we need to do is make sure that we are completely dialed into what that looks like, completely understand what it's likely to mean in terms of that increasing demand across the whole of this district and all of the other districts in Norfolk, and make sure that we're regularly, routinely modelling our response model to make sure that we're best equipped to meet those demands. And use of technology, I'd say, just on the final point there, we're just about to start a trial on video response. So in the same way that you might expect to see a GP online on video for those calls that are able to facilitate that, we will look to do similar. So it won't fit for all, it absolutely won't. But actually a large proportion of our society now, I would suggest, are quite used to operating on a video call in the first instance. And if it means that you can, we can support a set designated time where we know that we will be there, rather than wait for the response that might not arrive because the next emergency might be coming in, then I see that as being positive. That's not going to fix things overnight. I know it's not, but at least hopefully within the longer run that will assist us to better manage our demand.
Two quick questions. I think at the table in 3-4, I didn't really want to there are two categories that mystify me slightly. The first one is safe collapse, ill, injury, trap. But the second one is administration. So now call outs for administration. This is something more in depth than that.
So I can answer the safe collapse and your injury trap. I did try to explain.
I wonder what a trap is.
That would be a trapped person as opposed to the laying of a trap. This predominantly, the most amount of calls within that field.
Yeah, I was thinking of the figures, that covers a multitude of things.
It does, yeah, but what we see is predominantly that is our people calling in to raise a concern for safety in some way, shape or form. And most of those, if I'm honest, are related to either mental health or missing people falling in as well.
And administration?
The administration, I'm not 100% certain on, that's probably likely to be things like ongoing operations where we raise, we might not receive the call, but we raise a dispatch message. But what I can do is I can look into that and provide details for you.
Yeah, I'm also an Elsham Ward councillor, I'm a city tax bob down there, and picking up the point to raise around children engagement, and also going to work as well. I think it's terribly important that we think that positive way about these local engagement is our local PC engages like no tomorrow. I've got a 13-year-old now, just 13, and you go through all the issues of a boy in that situation, and boredom plays a role when they're out and about, and some of what goes on is simply because of boredom. You're absolutely correct about that. But the engagement that we've got from the local see is engaged with them, all these kids know the local police will play. And that demonstrates that he's out there engaging with them and having conversations with them. Comical one quite recently, but it shows you his level of dedication when it plays off. You just have to see 3 or 4 of them going down the road with one of the supermarket trolleys. So he sort of stops and says, that's yes, where did you find that? Going anywhere in particular with it? Very nice way. I went, no, we just found it. Okay, so I take you all the way back to the supermarket to deliver it up in person. Yes, we are. He had to go off to St. or something. He's at the supermarket later on. And he finds him there, bringing in the supermarket trolley. And he said to me, I was half expecting to find it in a, down an alleyway somewhere. So they actually walked in the supermarket and gave him a reward for taking the supermarket. This kind of level of engagement, knowing the young people, he was at the supermarket at that point in time, engaging on North Suburban intelligence. I'm always talking to them about local intelligence, potential drug issues, things, spot around the community. And that's actually, so it's really important, as Jan did as well, to feed that back to command, to the police commissioner, the level of support and engagement is vital. And when you don't have that, that's when things really deteriorate in a bad way. But just picking up also on the important thing, what Jan was picking up about the money involved here in these rises to support future issues, particularly issues around mental health, which are really severe and in part due to some of the domestic violence as well. I don't know how that's going to be sorted out in the future. I guess you don't know either. Again, I think it's quite an important thing to from my point of view as well, that somehow more resources fed back into central government around this issue. Because the only way you are going to the tables turn back down again on crime is through that and the adequate resourcing of police officers. Thank you.
Gentlemen, to Steve.
I was just going to say, yeah, that there are some issues there that are going to be for the nation to actually sort of help us locally to solve. And all I would say is that I think we need to maintain that focus on that early problem solving these issues in the hub, so it doesn't grow into this significant demand it could be. I think it's got better help people out before it becomes an issue than waiting for it to become an issue. And again, I think we refer to PC Ward. Probably would self-describe myself as a sheriff of Belgium. I'm quite happy to support that stuff. It's really well known. That doesn't surprise me at all. There's a significant amount of local intelligence and actually, is then able to feed back in, so we can actually be really proactive about where we have all these little small pockets of issues is commendable. So again, I'll feed back. Thank you for the feedback.
And the sheriff of Belgium doesn't carry 6 shoes, which we're really pleased about.
I'm going to take Susan then. I'm just going to ask one question.
Yeah, it's just, I should have done my own research really. I was interested in Jan's comments about rising numbers since 2015 of police officers. I just wondered whether that had taken account of the loss of the PCSOs. Because I think, I know in my local community, our local PCSO was very, very active. Well known by all the children, she would stand outside the school gates, talking to parents, talking to kids, that sort of thing. And everybody feels that they feel happy to think that they know, and when they know the children's names as well as like who's not engaged. So there's 2 questions really. Are the numbers, is that extra 300, does that take account of the loss of the PCSOs or not? And the second thing is, do you continue to engage in schools? Because I think that's extremely important. It's one way of learning about the children, knowing them, knowing the police.
So it's an increase of 300 police officers, but yes, you're absolutely right. The loss of the PCSOs is something outside of that. So yes, we've got more police officers, but we've lost the PCSOs that amounted to definitely less than 200 now. I can't give an exact figure. I'm afraid that yes, we have lost those. There was a protection of lead manager roles, so the likes of PC Ward, PC Role that we've heard here as well, the lead managers, that they are those local links and they are such a critical post within the constabulary. So we will have schools that we describe as tier one. What that means is that we're most likely to get most needy cases there. So we do have embedded safer schools officers in those schools. We haven't got one of those on Broadland district. However, the safer schools team do link in with the local lead managers, and there is an expectation of likes of PC or PC and our other lead managers to spend time in schools. So they should have those links there. They should have the easy access to their head teachers. Those lines of communication work both ways as well. So any concerns straight to the lead managers opposed to having to start, in a sterile way by coming on the phone system. It should just be straight into the lead manager.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mine was really just around the people who are going through mental crises. There, so we've got the EU ready committee, but obviously we've got the right people being involved. Obviously, when somebody's going through mental crisis, the police are involved. It ties the police up for a very long time. So it's looking at that relationship between you and the BBC and the officers to get them to come in earlier, so that we've got the right people, because they're already going through mental crisis. And the fact that the police are there is just exacerbating that situation. So therefore, by having the right people who can then direct you in the right position, so that was there to me, to be fundamental to
Yeah, so there are some initiatives in place now that help us. So we've got a mental health assessment team working within our control room. So that instant access, if you like, to records that would help us in terms of not a police record, but actually what is this person, what they've been diagnosed with, what medication should have taken, the history. We've got access to that information, whether it is need to have it, of course. We've got a dedicated joint unit with the ambulance service. So we've got some mental health care professionals working within that car. It's limited because it's one car in effect, so we've got more calls when that car is able to service, but at least it's something in terms of providing for the right person. And I will underline that I don't think police officers are the right people to be dealing with those people that are in mental health crisis. And then we mentioned diversion as well on a couple of occasions here, and that's absolutely right, I think personally, for those that potentially could lead to be in a position of mental health crisis. So we have got some help hubs. What I see there being potential is more for the police. We get to find and identify these issues, both in crisis and those that we think would be triggers towards people leading towards potentially being in crisis. Whether if we were able to refer, or we refer to the Suffolk Education Trust, but also maybe on a local basis. Sometimes it doesn't need to be a mental health care professional, it could perhaps just be someone to talk to. So again, that's something that we're looking in terms of options to perhaps grow that.
Thank you. I think now we're probably quite long. We take the recommendations on page 18, and someone wants to make recommendations on safety priority issues, something like that. And again, the endorsement of the mental health as a topic to be read further to improve community safety in the district. Everyone in favour? Thank you very much, both. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Right.
I was going to say, should we take 2 or 3 minutes? Councillor Leggett at the moment, but I'm sure he will join us there. I will just take us back to just a small procedural thing. Steve arrived late. Obviously, we need to do declaration of interest.
Oh, yes.
None? Okay. Ken's not here, but we are on item 8 on page 19, digital connectivity. So welcome, Steve.
Yes, thank you. So good morning, everyone. So my name's Steve Cunningham. I work for Norfolk County Council and managing the broadband rollout programs across Norfolk at the moment. So I think you've all got the paper I sent through earlier. So this is just picking up a few key points from that paper. So there's not too much here, so I should get through this fairly fast, hopefully. A brief history, first of all. Wrong keyboard, sorry. A brief history, first of all. Historically, Norfolk has been very disadvantaged digitally. So back in 2011, only 42% of properties had superfast broadband. Average download speed of 3.2 meg. So we identified this, and in 2012, we started the Better Broadband for Norfolk programs, starting with Contract 1, which delivered superfast broadband to 156,000 premises, using £30 million of funding from County Council and DCMS. Then moving on to Contract 2, which was another 45,000 premises, covering, so they all now have broadband up to 24 meg, and that covered 95% of the county. So moving on from that, obviously we didn't stop there, so we're now into Better Broadband for Norfolk Contract 3, which is funded £2 million from DEFRA and £11 million from Norfolk County Council. So that's now looking to deploy ultra-fast broadband, so gigabit-capable broadband, to around 9,000 rural premises across Norfolk. That is due to finish in 2023, and of those, there are 1,100 premises in Broadland, I should say, and of those, 505 which we've completed to date at the moment. As I say, that's still got another year and a half to run, and at that point we'll have done 9,000 prem. We also sought another £8 million of funding from DCMS for the local full fibre network. That programme is actually now completed, and that delivered ultra-fast broadband to 394 public buildings in Norfolk. The aim of that programme was to get infrastructure into the most rural parts of Norfolk so that commercial operators will actually take advantage of that and then develop it further. So far, there's been another 4,700 premises that benefited directly off the back of LFFN. Now, going forward, we're now working on Project Gigabit, and I'll touch on that a bit more later with some dedicated slides. By the time we've done all this and finished these programs in 2023, BBFN Contract 3, we should be up to 97% coverage across all of Norfolk. So as we stand in Broadland District, we are now at 96.73% coverage as of August, up from 95.2% at the same time last year. And gigabit capable coverage is now up to 48.69%, up from 8.8% the same time last year. The reason for the big increase in gigabit coverage is because we believe Virgin Media have upgraded their entire network to gigabit at sort of December time, January time this year. So there's massive strides being made in gigabit now across the county, and particularly in Broadland as well. I touched on Project Gigabit briefly. That's part of the government's UK digital strategy with £5 billion of funding, with an aim to upgrade to gigabit-capable broadband to all properties by 2033, and 15 million of those by 2025. That programme launched... Sorry, I've done the wrong keyboard. So that programme launched in March last year, with Norfolk being in the first live phase. We are rapidly moving through that as we speak. So the public reviews are now complete, and the procurement actually launched on August the 8th. The procurement will last for 18 weeks and is expected to be awarded by March 2023, at which point delivery will start, and we expect that to be completed by 2025. That is looking to deliver ultra-fast broadband to roughly 86,000 premises across Norfolk, of which 11,000 are in Broadland. But as I mentioned, it is a very complex programme, and until the procurement is complete, we don't know the exact number of properties or where they are in the county, but it will be a significant number in Norfolk and in Broadland specifically. We are also actively talking to all the suppliers in Norfolk. Because of the work we've done under BBFN, LFN, we are now attracting a lot of commercial attention from other providers such as City Fibre, Up, Openreach. Openreach, for example, in the last year have announced 69 new exchanges, of which those are the ones which I've highlighted are in Broadland, and they're doing significant work too. And also City Fibre have massive amounts of funding available, and they're now building particularly heavily in north of the city, and you may have seen them in Helsden and Drayton at the moment, very active. But they will be building around pretty much all of the north of Norwich area. And we also fully support the government's voucher schemes, which offers up to £3,500 per business or £1,500 per resident to subsidise the implementation of gigabit-capable broadband. At the moment, that scheme is blocked until the procurement is complete in November, at which point that will then fully reopen. But we do expect that to be open November time for future applications. And so thank you. So any questions? Sorry, there's a very quick run through.
Thank you. Very informative. But now I mentioned just before you did your presentation, I wanted to just find out a little bit more about what is now known as digital voice switchover. I found what it was that I was referring to, where people rely on broadband in the rural areas because the mobile signal is so poor, so they go onto broadband, and in the instance where there's a power failure, how is this also going to roll out? I mean, I looked at you saying that you're going to roll it out to the rural areas, and you listed Thorpe, Hevingham, and a couple of those, Reefham. We are in the marshes. We are very much more away from Norwich than those places. So I just wondered what is your extension into the really rural parts of Broadland. Thank you.
So I think you're referring to the PSTN, the public switch telephone network turn off, which is the old analog phone systems, which, as I understand, will be turned off by 2025, starting now as a phased approach until that date. And now I believe there's an obligation from providers to actually provide a replacement service. It would be over a internet connection, but it doesn't need to be a fast internet connection. It could be a very base, slow. So you're not talking about gigabit capable here. So they have to provide something, I understand. And in terms of survivability in a power cut, I believe they also have to provide a battery backed up solution for people that are vulnerable. So I understand they have to do something. I don't know the exact details yet, and this program is being run independently to what I'm doing. So it's been mostly run, I believe, by BT/Openreach, I understand. So there are plans there. People will be replaced with something, and that would be backed up with UPS or battery backup of some kind. Good. See.
Sorry. There's been a rise in the number of adverts that I see for broadband using mobile signal.
Yeah.
How do the two things link together, or do they link together, and if so, how?
I think what you're talking about there is obviously you've got a mobile contract. You could just access broadband over a 4G or 3G connection. So you'd have a small 4G, 3G router at home, or 5G where it's become available, and that would then just distribute broadband around your house via wireless that way. So all you're doing is exactly the same as you'd have with a wired connection. It's just you're buying a mobile contract instead. Now they are typically suitable if you got good coverage, but a lot of people, particularly in rural, just won't have good coverage at the moment. We are aware of companies that would offer high gain omnidirectional antennas that would boost coverage, and we have certainly recommended those to some people that they can't get good broadband. They're in a poor 3G, 4G service area. So there are companies like SimRush, I believe, for example, and others are there, which would put an antenna on your roof, and that would then boost the 3G, 4G signal, enabling you to get a decent broadband connection. The difference with them is that typically that you have to pay, there's often caps on usage on them. as opposed to a fixed line type coverage. You're generally unmetered. 4G, 3G ones tend to be more sort of capped about how much data you can use. Sometimes just on fair use caps, but there is often something there. So they are the same. It's just different ways to deliver that service.
So my supplementary question then is, if it were more practical for somebody to have that kind of broadband because they would get a better service, would they be eligible for the voucher scheme for some sort of extra?
I don't believe so. The voucher schemes are for gigabit capable coverage. Yeah.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I've got one of those back up to 4G. It's just we don't have any 4G to go back up to. So, but I guess that's my point is, as Councillor Nurden said, in the really rural areas, we've had fairly poor broadband, although it has improved significantly over the last year or so. Poor mobile network, and then we're going to be turning off the landlines. And so we're going to be very much dependent on that electricity supply. Oh, look at electricity supplies. How vulnerable are they going to become during the winter? And so, we do have a concern here, I think, in terms of isolation of rural communities in particular. And when you said about, I'd just like to go back to what you said about the obligation to provide a service and battery backup. Is that to the exchanges then, or to individual?
No, I believe that is. I'll need to double check 100% to make certain the facts are correct, but I believe it's battery backup to the home. So a handset would need a battery backup to make certain that your internet connection keeps alive, at least for a period, so it is to the end to your home address.
Okay, well, I suggest that's something that people are going to be very interested in, and we need to be clear just exactly what services is going to be available. I mean, you may have seen letters in the EDP just recently about the shutting down the landline service and people being concerned about that and that isolation.
I will double check with our contacts in BT to see what the obligations are, but the last I heard, I'm fairly certain they had to provide a battery backup of some kind.
I think it'd be useful if you could feed back to us, when you find out. Thank you. And then just to say, so in our village, we've got, when you say connectivity and the percentage figures, just to clarify, is this to village hubs or to individual premises?
Individual premises. So the 96% or whatever it was I said for
96.73%.
That is number of premises that are capable of getting ultra-fast broadband. Not necessarily the ones that have taken it up, but they can get broadband above 24 meg.
So, for example, in my village, where I see the fibre in a coil hanging off the telegraph pole, which hasn't been connected yet, that's in the small percentage that hasn't been
That would be not connected yet. I'm assuming that's probably a fibre cable by the sound of what you think.
Cable,
if you give me your postcodes, I'll double check with what's happening there.
I just wonder, how many situations we're in like that, where it's to the hub but not actually connected.
The percentage figures is to the premises. So if it's not connected, that doesn't account towards percentage coverage figure. So as once you connect it with gigabit, but it sounds like you are going to be, the gigabit coverage will go up a little bit.
Okay, and then finally on the vouchers, where you, again, in this situation where you've got this kind of isolation, would it be feasible for a parish council to apply on behalf of residents?
I believe you certainly can do that, because there is a problem. Sometimes you do need a group of people to apply to get the money needed to actually upgrade. Sometimes it's not cheap to upgrade, so an individual probably won't mean much. But if the parish can promote it locally, that's perfect, and we would happily promote that as well and speak to the parish as well about the best way to go about that.
Great, that's really useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Steve?
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit of confusion around from the whole issue of broadband from residents. I'm in Aylsham, Sue, Catch Boys as well, and we don't have fibre to the house, to the houses. So, and I think you said earlier on, you're not sure when fibre could possibly be rolled out.
It depends on what's commercially viable as well. As part of the Project Gigabit, there was a public review phase that happened. So they asked all the providers in the county, what are their plans over the next 3 years? If they had a viable plan, they're not including the Project Gigabit procurement. If they do, obviously you'll get Gigabit, as part of the commercial rollout from whatever providers are around. Aylsham, I would expect, would probably have some commercial operators interest just because of the size of Aylsham. I can't tell you which one's top of my head. So I'd expect Aylsham would get gigabit broadband at some point, either from commercial or as part of Project Gigabit. I just don't know what the timescales are, because obviously there's a lot to do here, so it's going to take an extended time to get it out to everyone.
Yeah, and I think, you know, a lot of residents in Aylsham have the same problem that I do, and it seems to vary across the Aylsham as well. I constantly have dropout. I find it hard to maintain a Zoom link, and there's other things I do on the net where I actually need fast connection speed, business, and I know it is an issue for residents. Is there any way that towns like Aylsham, with the councillors and county councillors as well, can have more updates around potential rollouts?
We definitely speak to a lot of the commercial operators, but a lot of them don't want to disclose too much about what they're doing because of they don't want to give the game away to their commercial rivals. So it's very hard for us to get information, for example, from people like Up or County Broadband. They're very happy to speak to us, but not so much more about their future plans because it's commercially sensitive.
So the obligation on them, I just finished that one. So the obligation on them through government programs to have this level of fibre rollout, what is motoring that? What can make that happen?
From the commercial operators, it's more about their commercial operations. It's about their profit, basically. Obviously, the government has launched the UK Digital Strategy, which is seeking to get ultra-fast broadband to everyone by 2023 and 85% by 2025. And that will be awarded as a contract in Norfolk in early next year. But outside of that, it's really down to commercial viability for operators to whether they decide to build or not.
Yeah, and I think that's a fundamental fault line that's occurring here, and I'm picking up from around the other parts of the country as well that there is a fault line, and it is that central government connection through to then directing, which seems to be a fault line in the process.
But that is what Project Gigabit is aiming to plug those holes. So it's aiming to plug the holes for the non-commercially viable areas of the county to get broadband into those which commercial operators aren't interested in doing at the moment.
But even in the areas where you could have commercial interest, it's not clear when and who.
We are aware of the operators that have declared interest, but we're not allowed to share that under NDA.
So are there any that you're not allowed to share for Aylsham?
Unfortunately not, no. I will check with DCMS what we're allowed to share, but it's highly sensitive about what operators have declared interest.
Okay. All right. Well, we've still got residents that are still sort of saying, when are we going to have fibre broadband? There's still no clear answers to this, unfortunately. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. If you, we do have a public inquiries email address, bbfn public inquiries at norfolk.gov.uk. If you send any particular inquiries through that with postcode, we will do our best to try and determine exactly what plans there are and when you can expect to get broadband.
Okay, thanks.
It's bbfn public inquiries at norfolk.gov.uk. We do deal with a lot of public inquiries, and we can do individual checks on postcodes just to see what plans we have. Are they in the BBFN program? Are they in the Project Gigabit likely to be? And are we aware of any other plans by any providers?
Maybe it would be worth, Chair, just to pop that in the minute. Councillors to pick up on.
And we do often get through, if people have particular problems with ISPs, sometimes we do deal with those, and we can sometimes get some resolutions.
Thanks.
Thank you. Leah's got that. On the percentage then that are not going to get this, obviously you just see it as a percentage, but what is the quantum, and is it readily available on a map anywhere to say these areas will not be getting?
Not at the moment. I think we're going to have to wait till the Project Gigabit procurement to be completed. Then we'll know the exact state of that. Then we should be able to start working out whether we think there's any areas that will be excluded. And what we'll then start working out is plans how we can help those to actually get broadband.
Okay, so will that come back to us in March 23?
That would probably, we get the procurement finishes in 18 weeks, so around about November time. Then there's obviously got the assessment of that procurement. So probably, early next year, February, March next year.
Thank you. Anybody, anything else? I don't think there are any recommendations. It's more we've just identified concerns and everything. So.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify the 1,500 per resident grant.
Yeah.
It just went over my head. Could you please explain how and when people would need to apply for that?
Yeah, so there's a website. I think the link's on the bottom there. If you go there, you type your postcode in. That will say whether you're valid for a voucher or not. If you are, it will give you a list of suppliers that are active in your area, and then you would apply to those suppliers to say we were interested in obviously building broadband using the gigabit voucher scheme, and at that point they'll take it forward with you from there. They will then apply for vouchers, £1,500 per resident, £3,500 per business. And it depends on the company you're going with, but it's then trying to drive interest and get interest from the local community to apply. If it's just one person, it may not be enough. So you really need sort of a parish councils, if possible, to really promote it going forward. Yeah, so we can get as many as we possibly can. Yeah, particularly because these more rural communities aren't cheap to upgrade, so you do need as many vouchers applied for as possible.
Thank you. Could we move then that we fetch this back at March 23 for a review and to see exactly where we are? Everyone happy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. See you in March 23.
Super. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 9, the customer strategy update, page 23, Ken, and that's Julie, and I think we have Debbie joining us as well.
Just let Steve out because he probably can't get through the door.
Okay.
Carry on without me.
Thank you. Far away.
Morning, thank you. So this report picks up on the customer services strategy, which Cabinet agreed in July, so just over a year ago. And this committee asked that it came back in once we had appointed our lead, customer services lead, and they'd been in post a year, hence why this is now coming back in front of you. What I would say is section 4 really outlines the progress that we've made. It by no means is it complete, it's a continuous journey, but we have made some significant strides in our customer services. As I say, we continue to work hard and take on board the feedback, but I think the main points to highlight really are our phone abandonment rates have fallen dramatically. Back in quarter 4 of 21-22, 21-22, just get my years right, and we were up at 11%, and we've worked hard over the sort of summer and everything. That's now come down. At quarter 1 it was down to 8%, and in fact in July we got down at 1 week to 5%. So obviously it fluctuates, but certainly in July we were averaging at about 6%. So we continue to work hard and look at various ways. We've reconfigured the way the phones work, for instance. We've worked hard with individual teams. We've looked at when demand is coming through. So there's lots of work continues to be done on terms of phones. We've also rolled out or continue to roll out different ways of feedback. So initially we had the feedback form on our website. We're now starting to do that in other ways too, and I'm sure Julia can expand on that one in a moment. So in terms of gathering that customer feedback, we continue to look at how we do that, so that we get the full range of how we deliver our services, whether that's face-to-face, whether that's on the phone, whether that's by email, or through the website there. And also in terms of the customer panel, as you know, and we brought that back in earlier in the summer for approval, and pleased to say we're now up to 210 people that have signed up for that in just over 3 months, which I think is a really good response. We do know that our colleagues at the county reached 250, but that took them 2 years to do that. So just to give you a comparison, I think we are doing really well, and obviously we'd like to really continue to grow that, and we are looking at ways now of really targeting to make sure that the people that join that panel are representative of the sort of, our demographics and makeup of both districts, so that we have a really true representation on those panels. And I know our colleagues in certain areas like council tax and housing are keen to start utilising that panel during the autumn and the winter of this year to undertake some consultations with them. So hopefully we'll start. We haven't actually used them yet for any consultations, but we hope to do so very shortly, and certainly this side of Christmas. I think the other thing to say is, contact channels. We continue to look at how we're doing that. We're looking at new features as well. So rolling out of things like callbacks. We're going to pilot that to give people the opportunity when they call us to actually leave their name and number rather than hang on the phone, so we can call them back. We're going to pilot that in a small area first to see how that impacts both for the customer. Is that positive for the customer? Is it not? So we'll trial and see how that one goes. I'll hand over to Julie if there's anything else you want to add before we answer any questions. Is there anything else you want to talk back in terms of the feedback where we've added that on to other forms?
Yeah, the feedback is now on all forms of communications, but we've tried to add it at the end of the service that we're providing, so we get the overall response of that service area. And we're also now just starting to put a customer feedback on the phones, but we're trialing it in a small area, and we'll build and try and get that across all the contact centres by end of September, early October, so that we can benchline it before we then start to put the callback function on to see how effective it is. So we've got data to provide to you, so you can say, was it effective? How well did it work? We've got some data to give you.
Thank you. Questions? So I've got Sue, Ken, Sue.
Thank you. Yes, I was really pleased to see the callback function. I think one of the issues that I have is that when people phone in, often they don't get, somebody answers the phone, but they don't get to the person they want to get to. And so they're not an abandoned call, but they're not very happy that they haven't actually managed to talk to anybody who can help them. So they haven't got anywhere effectively. So I think for me, that was one of the questions I had been going to ask, is were we planning to do this? So I think that actually, I'm very pleased to see that on there. So I'd be very interested to see what responses you get to that. So it's not really a question, but it's just well done, because that's something I think is quite important.
Yeah, good morning, Julia. On item in here about streamlining out of our services, we know with the winter of discontent coming, we're going to have a lot of people who are going to have quite a lot of difficulties and the access to us. We looked at it, with how we can improve the service for the out of hours and how you perceive what we will need in the coming winter.
Absolutely right, Councillor Kelly. And what we're doing at the moment is starting to look at how we respond to that demand that's coming through. Certainly it's something that's starting to come through. We've got a paper coming shortly into CMLT, so I'll make sure we pick it up around the out of hours element of that in terms of our total response. It's a really good point, so I'll feed that one into there.
Lovely, thank you.
So can I just add a little bit to that, in the fact that when I first started looking at the out-of-hours services, on one side you had an automated button. If you were phoning out of hours, normally because you're quite distressed or there's a problem, but you could press the button. So option 1 if you wanted homelessness or whatever. But on the other side, you actually had to make a note of the phone number and then rephone. So we've standardised it. So when you phone through on either Broadland or South Norfolk service areas, you'll get an automated, so you can press the button, you can get options, because it's stressful enough as it is, isn't it, when you're phoning out of hours, because clearly you need help then. So we have looked at that and improved and put more functionality on there. Thank you.
Sue, problem?
Yes. Can I just ask, on the details of the customer panel, you say excellent that you've got 195 recruited to date. Is that across the two councils, across Broadland and South Norfolk, or is that just the Broadland figure?
That is a Broadland and South Norfolk figure.
And do you know how it splits or not?
Broadland haven't taken it up quite so enthusiastically. We had
That's very diplomatic of you.
So we are going to do some more targeted for the Broadland. We want to bring it up so that we've got approximately the same on each side.
Yeah.
Obviously, if we did one for Broadland, then we wouldn't be able to use as many people to keep the demographics correctly. So we are doing targeted. So we were 71 last time I looked. So yeah, that is an
Yes.
area we know we need to work
Yeah,
on.
so it's sort of all 2 to 1, really, isn't it? Two, double in South Norfolk from what we have here.
Yeah, but we're not judging. We're
No,
just
no, it's just
we're just
interesting.
going to try and bring that number up in the Broadland area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and customer feedback is always one of those that it's really hard to get the engagement on it. What strategies are being taken forward to try and increase that?
That's why we are trying to now add it to the phones, because sometimes if you've gone on the website, you might respond to it. And human nature is you're more likely to respond if you're dissatisfied or you're very happy and you want to say thank you to the service area. So we're looking at trying to maybe streamline the survey in the future. At the moment, we still benchmark. We've got about almost a year's worth of data, and we want that year's worth of data before we start to change it. But we might think about cutting some of the questions out, and so it's not quite so long, because it is quite long. And the one on the phones, I feel, is more targeted to the phone side of it. It gives an overall satisfaction question, but it's saying, did we respond to you and deal with your query on the first point of contact? Because that's where we need to start looking at the phones. Have we been able to deal with that customer fully when they first phone, so they don't phone again or feel frustrated? So once we start getting some more data, we'll be able to actually work out where we need to go next, if that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got Sue, Jan, and then Steve. Sue? Yeah. Jan?
Thank you very much, Julia. On page 27, you've got customer feedback to help shape our services based on customer need is the strategy aim. And you have identified that actually when it comes to the website, you've got 57.1% was satisfied with the ease of finding information on the website. Yeah. So that's fairly low. So presumably that would then result in more phone calls coming in, probably. So I suppose the question is, and I've found difficulty finding things on the website. So the search facility could be improved. Is that something you're looking at?
Yes, that is one of the things. That the website does need to improve slightly in the fact that finding things, the search functionality, and some of the forms we're picking up through the customer satisfaction, that they don't always work as well. Maybe we haven't tested them properly. So yeah, the website is something we are looking at. Thank you.
A supplementary or different point, no. So it's great that you're looking at diversity, in terms of the customer panel. I'm just wondering how you ensure that and how it's measured. Presumably against, as you say, your demographics, but it must be difficult.
Yes, it is difficult. Thank you for your sympathy. Yes, we've tried to use some of the census data and come up with questions which aren't too intrusive for people joining the panel. And some people have said they'd prefer not to say whether they're disabled or what their disability is and things like that. So we've gathered enough people who've answered the questions and actually given it to be able to start working out where we need to target it, such as it's quite clear when I split it that Broadland haven't got quite as many joining the panel, but I've also gone down to age ranges, whether they're working, whether they're not working, so we've got a range of questions that we've asked them, and at the moment we're great, we've got a lot of people, but I now need to sort of target it. So the areas where I haven't got anybody between 18 and 24 on either side. So obviously we'll need to do some more targeting, and we're working with comms on that at the moment.
So I guess that's issues and risks, and 10 is equality implications. You've got none, but actually there is an implication there. Might need to be updated.
Thank you.
Steve?
Hiya. Yeah, just picking up, it's really similar sort of point that that Jan raised. And on the website, I know it is hard to use. If the search engine in there doesn't really work, the company one, by the way, is not great. It's a bit better than our one, but that's not great either. The search facility just really, you put in a search and it invariably comes up with nothing. And there's other things on there that are hard to find as well. And I agree with this static. I'm not surprised by it about the dissatisfaction, because it is hard, complicated, and you're not getting through to what you want to get through on that website. But one of the things that we raised, and that was focused in on at the members working group that we had on this as well. One of the other things that was raised there was large companies, and you were right when you said this earlier on, we focused on this some months ago, that when you've engaged on the phone, to then come on to, say, the website and then give some feedback on the website is so disjointed, and it's not really going to work too well. So, large companies are on text messages, you're getting that text that comes through after the engagement on the phone. And there's 5 normal points to that. Standard format, all large companies using the same one, actually. And then when I asked this question to members working group, we said that facility is there. We've got the technology to do it, but it's not been rolled out yet. So are you referring to that in this, that you will be rolling out that technology to operate off of texting on a text request on the survey to phone calls after engagement?
What I'm going to be adding on is to the contact centre a feedback form. So when they phone in there and they get the welcome message, they can choose to engage on a customer satisfaction survey. Am I getting it right? Yeah, customer satisfaction survey. So at the end of the call, they stay on the call and it's all automated, and they get asked the questions. As you say, there's about 5 of the questions, but it doesn't hold the agent up, so that the agent can then take the next call, and then we get the feedback like that. And we're rolling that out at the moment, hoping to get it done by the end of September.
So you get a direct response from what's just happened. Okay. Thank you.
Debbie?
Can I also add, we're doing some work to find out why people contact us as well, because I think it's really important to understand, why do people phone us, or why do people come on the website? And I think for us, we're piloting in council tax, for instance, some way of tagging the individual phone calls, so we can find out predominantly what are people ringing us for. Is it predominantly on a Monday, just before the, we normally people pay on the 15th or the 1st of the month. Is it calls around that? So we can absolutely start to then target our services, because if we understand our customers' needs much greater and in much more detail, we can then really focus on that, and that can then drive how we serve them. So that's what we're trying to do now, is utilize some of the telephony technology to us, and we'll say we're piloting it in council tax, tagging the calls to identify what they were what they were coming on the phone to ask for. So we're looking at that type of information. We're also starting to use some of the business intelligence, and there's a paper coming through to Cabinet shortly, seeking sort of the go-ahead really to do some more work around business intelligence. So it's all about looking at, and we've piloted some work on the telephones again, so that we can start to see, for instance, during the day, when our calls coming through, when if we are having abandoned calls, when is that occurring, so that we can then start to put more people on the phones at certain times, etc., so that we really get that data. And there's something that we haven't been or had the ability to have that data and analyze it to that extent before.
Thank you.
Can I just add one thing regarding is the customer journey, is when somebody phones through, like the point you raised earlier, is where they go to. So do they get to the person they need to get to at the end of the call? I just thought I'd mention that because I thought you might be interested. Thank you.
Yeah, and just in this, it's another issue, it's just in terms of what the changes here, because I know from a long-term experience as a Broadland councillor, generally speaking, we wasn't hearing complaints from residents about telephony and other things. So there's been a change. We've had COVID, and we've got some joint operations going with South Norfolk in terms of telephony, etc. So I'm guessing some issues have been raised there, but also the flexible working methods as well, Debbie, because I understand that, I don't know if this has changed, so it may have changed since last time I discussed this with you, that when that some officers are able to work from home, and then they're also able to have some flexibility from home. So if they choose to then, you know, go and do this for an hour or whatever, then they can come back on. So there could be an issue around management of that, unscheduled nature of it. So therefore you're getting some dead periods on the phone. So I know there was an issue with that because you discussed it with me some time ago. I was just wondering if that was still occurring or if that had been sort of ironed out somehow.
So I think it was about people not understanding how the telephones actually worked and not realizing that they had to, particularly in the contact centres, sign in and sign out. So we've had lots more training. We've done a full training program for people so they absolutely understand much better how the telephony works there. In terms of management of staff times, I mean, absolutely anybody who has to take time out during the day should be telling their manager. It's down to their manager to make sure they have sufficient staff available at any one time. So that is a management training, and we've been doing that with managers. I wouldn't say that people just drop out. There would be a reason why they need to go, whether that is, you know, they've been called to the school or something because the kids fallen over, which used to occur anyway in you know, when we used to be in the office. Certainly what we're not seeing is, and I'm sure if Mike was still here, he would tell you that the productivity of his team working from home actually increased during COVID and didn't fall. And I think, you know, we've got people now coming in to the office as well as working from home if that's appropriate. You know, as I say, I think it's been getting to grips with how the phones work. And to be honest, you know, we would still miss phone calls even if they were sat in the office because they now come through on your headphones. It's not like in the old days when you had a handset sitting there and it was ringing in the office and anybody could hear it ringing and pick it up, because they're coming through on individual officers' headsets. All you can see sometimes is a part of the headset flashing. But even if it was flashing and nobody was sitting there, I couldn't call it up because I couldn't log into somebody's, you know, laptop. So even if people were all in the office, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to resolve the problem. It is how people operate, but as I say, there's been such a focus on answering the phones, right through from CMLT, ADs, directors, all the way down. We've done lots of training with teams that I do think we're now starting to see that come through in those figures of abandonment rates. I think absolutely people have had that focus on them, you know, individual team levels. I certainly know my area with my direct managers, you know, the senior managers, we discuss every month phone stats and go through and find out, yes, there's blips. You know, the energy rebate scheme that we had to administer in council tax, we did staff up some more. But, you know, the other week when it was all again on the phones, I walked into that team that morning and they said to me, oh my goodness, because Martin Lewis had been on the telly again talking about it, there'd been a sudden absolute influx. Now, you know, with the best will in the world, we didn't know Martin Lewis was going to be on the telly that morning. So, you know, we had staff in there, but they'd seen an absolute influx that day in phone calls as a result of that, because it obviously suddenly people had realised, and people who had never contacted us about this in the last 2 months it's been going, had suddenly woken up and decided they needed to phone us that morning. So yes, there will be times when something happens like that, but on the whole, people are much more responsive now. And just to say as well, I think actually this sort of hybrid working, what it does enable us to do is look longer term about actually Can we have people working? You know, in terms of filling vacancies, as everybody knows, it's tough out there recruiting. But actually, if we have got the ability for people to work, say, at a weekend processing housing benefit claims, that's probably a good thing. You know, if somebody can do that and fit that in, because they'd rather work a weekend than come into the traditional office hours. So I think there could be some benefits from having that flexibility too.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you. You've got a lot of information here based on percentages of things. It would be interesting for us, I think, to see how it's broken down per department. For example, is the Help Hub managing to answer all the telephone inquiries that they have? Are people not getting through? Same with other departments like planning. How is the satisfaction of residents in planning applications? Is that something that's possible?
At the moment, as you just spoke about, we haven't actually, we're just going live really with the telephones, aren't we? So we haven't got that yet, but we will be able to tell it by department when we get there in terms of the telephone satisfaction.
Satisfaction. All right. Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Any more before we move to recommendation? Okay, I'll take you to page 31 at the bottom and top of page 32, recommendation 14.1 and 2. Going to take them on block. Everyone happy? So, yeah. Yes. Thank you. That was unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Julia. And I'll now move to agenda item 10, the work programme, and I'll pass to Sue on my left. Thank you.
Second ago. You're now.
Is that better? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so yes, moving to page 33 on my papers. Is it 33? Yeah. Okay, so you've got the top 3 items there, which we've covered today. So the next meeting is on the 15th of November. So there we've got a review of the housing allocations policy, which was implemented in April 21. It was reviewed in December 21, and you agreed at that time to review it again in November this year. So that's coming. The next 2 items at the bottom of page 33 and the top of page 34 are ones that have been added since. So these have both been put forward to us by the Assistant Director of Regulatory, and they are to look at pilots that have been in place for you to basically review and to really make recommendations on whether you feel they've been worthwhile, whether they should continue. So one of those is early intervention antisocial behaviour officers. So it's to review their work, and they'll come along obviously with some stats of a pilot that they've been undertaking. So that should be really interesting. And the other one is a business regulatory support hub, again to review the work that they're doing with a one-stop shop, which again is being piloted on temporary funding. So there'll be 2 really, I think, quite interesting things for you to look at and review, and just kind of look at the stats, advise any sort of recommendations that you've got of what they should be looking at, and if you feel that they have been doing worthwhile work. So that will be quite an interesting meeting in November. We have moved to the January meeting. So we've moved the Police and Crime, the PCC, who was going to be coming along to the November meeting. Unfortunately, they're not able to make that meeting. So we've moved that on to the 24th of January 23. Also at that meeting, there will be the joint budget that you have every year following your workshop, which will happen in October. And also, because of the other items that have been added to the November meeting, we've moved the partnership register review to that meeting as well. Then we have the meeting on the 4th of April 23. At the moment, the only thing scheduled for that is your annual report.
I don't have any updates for the water supply and management from Councillor Coppleston this time for you. And the only other item on there is the workshop, which I believe Rodney Fincham is going to sort out with you at the next meeting to set up a date for the workshop in October, where you discuss questions to put to Cabinet for the budget meeting.
Grant?
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Just a little concern of mine is that things get forgotten. And I was looking for what was agreed at an Overview and Scrutiny Committee back in 2017, that we would receive regular reports on news and the joint venture. So I went to the OneDrive to go and look for what was agreed. It's got the time and task panel agendas and minutes of 2016 and 17. It's on there. And then I went to Overview and Scrutiny minutes to see, well, okay, what did this committee agree that we wanted to have on a regular basis? And it's only got papers from 2019. So I can't go back to see, well, what what reports were we supposed to be receiving? We were supposed to be receiving reports, and that was agreed at Cabinet level as well. So I'm just wondering that things might get missed off because we forget about them, and I don't know whether that's maybe out of convenience. Another thing I noticed when I was on the papers for Overview and Scrutiny, I see it's on the OneDrive, it's South Norfolk and Broadland Council's papers, but we only get, it's right at the top there, under the word papers. It says South Norfolk and Broadland Councils, but we don't get South Norfolk. So that's just a little technical thing that maybe needs to be looked at. So what I'm asking is, please can we have some kind of a additional work done on putting papers on here so that we can actually go back and see what Overview and Scrutiny has agreed in the past. Thank you.
Absolutely.
As you know, I've only been doing this meeting for the last couple of years, so I will certainly look back on the item that you've said was last looked at in 2019, because I don't, 2017. Okay. Yeah, I'll certainly have a look and feed that back. Okay. I don't have access, unfortunately, to your OneDrive, so again, I'll have to take that away and have a look, maybe with committee team and IT, and see what we can do about that. Okay. Maybe, yeah.
I'd Sue. Caroline, did I see your hand? No? Okay. Sue and Sue.
Related. Thank you, Chair. Yes, we were looking for the budget books, and we encountered a similar difficulty in that the budget books that are available online are only snippets of them for the last 3 years that are on our website, not the complete budget book, and also only went back to 2021. And we were hoping to look at some information prior to that. So could we please have the budget books in full on our website going back to 2018-19, please? Thank you.
Sorry, that's not to come to scrutiny. That's literally just a query about the website. Yeah.
But it's a similar issue that we haven't got access to some archive information because it hasn't yet been put on.
Yeah, I can take that back to
website.
officers outside of the meeting. Yeah,
Thank
certainly.
you.
Okay.
Holland.
Given the problems that we all seem to face with Anglian water, etc., to do with sewage and drought potential and leaking pipes and so on, do we have any update from Councillor Coppleston as to when she might have something for us from Anglian water?
I will contact her again and see if she's got anything in light of the comment. Yeah, certainly. Okay.
Thanks. It's partly because I'm not sure in terms of process here, so you have to guide me. But given the cost of living crisis we've got, and in particular the cost of energy, and that we have programs in terms of assisting our residents. I'd like to know, and I don't know whether this committee can scrutinise just how that is going, and as a matter of urgency, given the situation, and what more could be done. Now, it could be a question at council, but I wonder also if it's something that this committee ought to be looking at as a matter of urgency, in terms of what, for example, the Warm Homes programme and things like that.
Yeah, with view to the process, the topic analysis is just after the work programme. So that's how you would raise an item. I would say if it's something you want to discuss, obviously it's going to be more urgent than coming to the next meeting, because we're going to be into November. So this might be something that needs to be looked at maybe outside of the meeting. But I would say maybe raise that with officers directly as opposed to scrutiny, because we're kind of governed by having 5 meetings in a year. Whether or not that will also be coming, I presume, to Cabinet at some point.
Yeah, so you've, as you said, Sue, total respect to you, Sue. I know you've only been here 2 years. In regards to the previous point that Grant raised, two issues on the, we're restricted to 4 or 5 meetings a year. Again, Grant will verify this, and Grant did raise this actually under COVID when I was sitting up there. I remember at one meeting about we're never at that restriction. This is something that's just seems to be said now, and obviously not invented by you, clearly. So no, nothing issue with you. But that's not. If you go back to our overview and scrutiny handbook, it doesn't actually say that at all. And we always operated. I think we had down 11 meetings. If you look at 11 meetings, if you look at the prescription under ONS, under Constitution. So we're not restricted as 4 or 5. It's just something that seems to have come from somewhere, but we'd actually done that restriction. And the issue about the archive as well. I don't know. Perhaps sometimes councils, and we had this under EcoCube as well, didn't we, Grant? Some councils decide to have a cut-off point, and they sort of delete archives. Now, 2019 is when we had the one team come in, and the archive was there pre-2019. So I think we do need to check on that. Has that been deleted on archive? Because one of the issues that come up under the time and task was deletion of some archives, which then causes a problem later on in terms of meetings and what happened and where we were. So it was agreed there we wouldn't do that. We'd keep long-term archive. So again, if you could just clarify this. Yes, this is minutes meetings, yeah, and how they relate. So they should be on the, so we can find them pre-19. So we just need to check they haven't been deleted. That'd be really important. And this point about 4 or 5 meetings, we really do not recognise that, and the Constitution sort of alludes to 11, as far as I recall. And of course, as a work programme, we can agree this is what we're here for, to put an item on as well. So I'm just making that point. Could I just make this point as well about archive in relation to this point I want to raise today, actually, around the this goes off so quickly. This iPad, I hate the bloody thing. Hang on just a second. Is the section on reviewing partnerships? One of the reviews we did complete, and I think you was a member at the time, Grant, when I chaired previously, prior to 2019, was a commitment to, on a 4 to 5 year basis, review the partnerships with our housing suppliers. It was very key. It seems very key in terms of satisfaction, what was going on out there in terms of residents, which housing associations were doing a good job, which ones weren't. And as you see nationally, there's been pretty damning report now around housing suppliers, and key one in our area, which actually was top of the list in terms of non-repairs. So I think, yes, we've got their review partnerships, but I think we could also highlight that we do actually want to do a review on housing suppliers and that partnership with them.
On that list, but yeah, I get, what you might, as an add-on from that, wish to do that as maybe a time and task panel independently.
Yeah, we did that time task
Yeah.
previously. Yeah.
So if there are issues identified
Yeah.
from that, then yes, there's every chance then that you'll
So
probably want to do.
The time task met,
Yeah.
and it set up how we could forward questions to them. We'd invite them in as well to come and discuss and raise issues. So we could, maybe if we agree, we could just highlight that today.
Everyone,
It's a meaningful piece of work for residents.
yes, everyone happy with that? Yeah, okay. And Jen, the point you were making, I mean, I would go directly to Mike Pursehouse and raise that, because again, I know that they're doing.
It ought to. Oh dear, sorry. It ought to come under our new committee, the Wellbeing Committee. That I had to stop and look up its name. Community Housing and Planning, and that's the two. What was it? Place Shaping has merged with Wellbeing. Fran is our portfolio holiday, who is on holiday. Is the portfolio holder, and Mike Pursehouse, who was here earlier, is the person who's sort of over that section. And if there's any inquiries or any reports that ought to come forward, I guess that will be the area from which it comes.
I think there is something coming forward in that policy committee, whether it'll come to this next one that's happening next week or the week up the next one along. But I know there is talks, I've seen it on report schedules, so probably best to talk to Mike about it. But I think it is being covered and they are looking into it. But yeah.
We're all singing from the same hymn sheet.
But yeah, I have seen comments and things about it, so it is coming along.
I suspect there might be, and that's good because I'm sure we're all interested. Yeah.
So-
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Just one more question about access to the meetings online. I'm wondering how or when the decision was made about which of our committee meetings are live streamed. There are some that you can only get access to if you come along, whereas there are some that you can watch from home online. And obviously that applies to our residents as well. So I'm just wondering how and when that decision was made and whether that's reviewable.
Above my pay grade. but my understanding is that it was agreed that we would stream decision-making committees, so Cabinet and Council and Planning Committee, and it was also agreed that we would continue to stream Overview and Scrutiny Committee, but I don't know when that was made. I presume that was in line with the leader Emma Hodds and CMLT.
Good. Anything else in the work programme?
Just to clarify then, we are going to consider some other options to add into the work programme, yes?
Yes, so the review of partnerships is already on the work programme, so there may well be a time
So
and
arising
task
from that,
panel.
we may find some
Yes.
other, and we may also find some other things where we'd like to invite people in.
Definitely.
To give us some, yes.
That's the kind of thing, that's the kind of work that I think would be really useful to actually get
I
outside
agree.
speakers.
That's why I'm just clarifying that's the purpose.
Yeah, and I think on page 35 there is the flowchart of how that will come through. So if there's anybody that wants to fetch anything through, do it via that route, and then leave it.
But we have agreed, because we did go around the room, that we're going to add on in a box, I believe, so that we will be forming a time and task panel for a housing review of our housing partners. I thought we would just agree to that.
So you're wanting to bring that forward on its own prior to it going in January?
Yeah, because
and being discussed as part of the SLAs generally?
Yes, because the issue with that is that it's a clear, distinct thing that's the major concern for people who rent and are housing, partnerships. It's a key piece of work, and we do know that there are different issues, particularly with that lead supplier, shall we call them, housing association, and we did flag up some issues there before. There's some throughput into them in terms of repairs and functions and all the rest of it. So January's a long way off to then have that, and then simply agree in January we're going to have a time task panel. Might as well agree to it now because it's a significant piece of work. Well, I thought we just had, because you, Chair, we went through the room, we agreed that.
Partnerships, that would be an opportunity to look at other potential.
Yeah, that's reviewing general part.
Yeah, I think. So, just clear, we're agreeing a time and task panel before we actually see the report.
No, there isn't a report on this. Basically what Sue does here is that she comes forward with a list of there are some organisations we can engage with, and you have to identify, are they a partnership or aren't they a partnership? That's the key thing here. So what will come forward is a list of defined what are partners and who's on that list. So that is what Sue will come forward on. So what we're saying is, well, we know one of these areas, a key bit of work, part is very clear, housing associations. And for our residents, this is a clear thing for us to look at. We've looked at it before, so we can agree here and now to set up a time to agree something meaningful to be getting on with. And we've got the general review of partnerships. And I thought that's what we'd agreed.
Can I just...
Because...
There's quite a bit of work, I think, that needs to be done on looking at how the social housing is operating and what standards they're operating and how our residents feel about those and whether they're getting a good service. That's not the same as our housing policy, which is a completely different thing.
Exactly.
So I think that's actually quite a substantial piece of work, which is why I would support the idea of having a time and task panel too, because the one thing I get more comments about than anything else are from people who are in social housing who are struggling with problems. And I think that's a really valid thing for us to actually investigate and try to bring forward some things to this committee and on to council potentially about those sorts of things.
Okay, so do we need to then appoint to the time and task panel? So, yep. So, yeah.
So
any nominations?
I'll put myself forward.
So, Councillor Riley, Councillor Davies, Councillor Holland.
Need some cross-party members.
I was going to say. No one from that side. I'll. No. Yeah, I'll put myself forward.
Okay, so we have a 5 to 6 panel, don't we?
Yeah.
That's 4.
And then Councillor Greeville. So there we go. Thank you very much for that. Anything else? No.
No, and thank you, Sue, for
thank you.
reporting.
Thank you, and I'll see you all next week.